€698 million. 8 trains. Delivery date 2030. That was the announcement made at Belfast's Grand Central Station on the 7th of May 2026. A cross-border rail contract signed with full political ceremony, every major leader on the island present, cameras rolling, handshakes delivered. The Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, the First Minister, the Deputy First Minister, all there, all smiling. And then, that same evening, the same Taoiseach stood at a lectern in Queen's University Belfast and said something that did not make the press release. The people of the Republic now have nowhere near the level of engagement with the North that previous generations had. That sentence landed. It was honest in a way that official press releases never are. And it raised a question that the ceremony at Grand Central Station could not answer. What exactly did Ireland just buy for €698 million? A better train? Or a relationship that has been quietly hollowing out since the agreement was signed? That is what this video is about, not the trains. The gap between the map and the territory. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments. From somewhere in Ireland, north or south, from the UK, the US. I am genuinely trying to understand the geography of who watches this channel and how much of this story lands differently depending on where you are sitting. Tell me the city and how much time you have. Are you on a quick break or are you settling in for the full picture? Now, back to the station in Belfast. The official version of yesterday's story went like this: a landmark contract. A new enterprise fleet for the Dublin to Belfast service. 8 intercity trains built by the Swiss manufacturer Stadler, with 400 seats each. Tri-mode capability, meaning they can run on electric, diesel, or battery power. Step-free interiors, USB charging, a dining car. Up to 16 services per direction every day. Journey time, under 2 hours, compared to the current 2 hours and 5 minutes at best, 2 hours and 15 at slower runs. First delivery from late 2028. In passenger service from 2030. The Irish Government's Department of Transport, the Northern Ireland Executive's Department for Infrastructure, and, here is the number that did not get its own headline, €165 million from Peace Plus. That is a European Union program managed by the special EU programs body, designed specifically for cross-border peace and reconciliation projects. €165 million from Brussels. In a project signed on the same island that chose to leave the European Union. That is one of the 3 threads running through this story. Here is the second. The fleet being replaced today entered service in 1997. 87, before the Good Friday Agreement, before the Dáil and Stormont had a formal north-south structure, before most of the people watching this video had a smartphone. The people of Drogheda, Dundalk, Newry, and Portadown, the towns along the corridor, have been traveling on the same trains for 28 years while both governments found other things to do. And here is the third thread, the over 2 million people who live along the Dublin to Belfast economic corridor. Not the institution, not the corridor as a concept. Over 2 million people who make this journey for work, for family, for education, every single week, and who were apparently not a sufficient argument for replacing a 28-year-old fleet until now. That was the surface. Now let us look at what is underneath. The North-South Ministerial Council, the body created by the Good Friday Agreement to drive practical cooperation between Dublin and Belfast, met in Armagh on the 8th of May, the day after the signing. Both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach were present. That level of joint ministerial engagement with the formal North-South structures is not routine. It matters because the machinery of North-South cooperation was designed not just to produce goodwill gestures, but to generate real interdependence, shared health infrastructure, shared energy grids, shared transport. The trains are the most visible output of that ambition in a very long time. But here is where the story takes a turn. The Taoiseach's lecture at Queen's University is not a minor footnote. The Lord David Trimble Lecture is one of the most significant annual occasions for reflecting on the agreement's legacy. David Trimble was the Ulster Unionist leader who shared the Nobel Peace Prize with John Hume for making the agreement possible. When the Taoiseach stands at that lectern and says the Republic has nowhere near its previous level of engagement with the North, he is not making a diplomatic observation. He is describing a problem. He knows what the institution was built to do. He is saying it is not doing it. The research he referenced is worth sitting with for a moment. People in the Republic, the 26 counties, have, over the past 2 decades, mentally and culturally retreated from the North. The Celtic Tiger years pulled the Republic's attention inward and southward. The 2008 crash consumed everything: housing, healthcare, Brexit, the pandemic. Each successive crisis narrowed the frame. The North became, for many people in the Republic, something that happens on the news, not something that involves them. The Taoiseach launched a program called Shared Home Place, a dialogue initiative for people across communities and traditions on the island, precisely because he can see this. Irishness does not stop at the border, he said, which is true, and which is something that apparently now needs to be said out loud, at a lecture, 28 years after the agreement created the architecture for living it. Here is the part nobody is talking about. The €165 million from Peace Plus is not just a funding line. It is a structural signal. The European Union is still financially present in Northern Ireland's cross-border infrastructure. Brexit did not end that. EU continued to flow into Northern Ireland through programs like Peace Plus. And without that €165 million, it is genuinely unclear whether the funding arithmetic for this project closes at all. Which means one of the largest cross-border infrastructure announcements in recent decades is partly a European Union project. On an island where one jurisdiction is inside the EU and one jurisdiction has left it, the EU is still building the railway. If that framing makes you feel something, either reassured or uncomfortable, that is precisely the point. The EU's role in Irish infrastructure is not a distant abstraction about Brussels bureaucracy. It is €165 million in the contract that the Taoiseach and the First Minister signed yesterday. If this is the kind of analysis that has been missing from your feed, consider subscribing. This channel covers Irish news the way it deserves to be covered. No spin, no hysteria, just the full picture. Now, back to the corridor. Over 2 million people live along the Dublin to Belfast economic corridor, linking the 2 largest cities on the island and several of the largest towns in between. The Taoiseach noted this figure at the signing. The primary rail service for all those people is, today, still running on a fleet that entered service in 1997. The new trains will offer up to 16 services per direction per day, compared to the current schedule. The target express journey time is just under 2 hours, a reduction of between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on the service. Step-free boarding, power sockets, a dining car. These are not luxury items. They are what every comparable European corridor already offers as standard. The Dublin to Belfast corridor is arriving at European standard approximately 30 years after European standard became the expectation. The passenger experience from 2030 will be noticeably better. But let us be precise about the timeline. The contract was signed on the 7th of May 2026. Delivery begins from late 2028. Testing and commissioning follow. Passenger service from 2030. A person in Dundalk who takes the Enterprise to Dublin today for work could retire before they commute on the new fleet. But all of that is still infrastructure. Here's what it actually means for the relationship the infrastructure is supposed to serve. The agreement's logic was always that cooperation produces interdependence, and interdependence produces stability. Technica. If the North and South are economically intertwined, trading, traveling, working across the border, then conflict becomes structurally irrational. The train is not just a train, it is a physical expression of the theory that shared space produces shared interest. The Taoiseach's admission at Queen's complicates that theory. If the Republic has stopped engaging with the North at the cultural and civic level, if the engagement has retreated to political ceremonies and infrastructure contracts, then the interdependence is becoming institutional rather than lived. Officials cooperate, ministers sign contracts. The nations they represent are, by the Taoiseach's own account, drifting apart. For those watching from the UK or the United States, particularly those who left Ireland in the 80s or 90s and are now in their 50s and 60s, this will land differently than it does in Dublin. For that generation, the Good Friday Agreement was the event that made Ireland feel like it was becoming whole. The slow cultural retreat of the Republic from the North is not a policy statistic. It is a personal disappointment. The island they left had momentum. The Taoiseach is saying the momentum has stalled. None of that, however, is the real issue. The real issue is what comes next. The formal North-South architecture, the ministerial council, the cross-border implementation bodies, still functions. The trains will be built. The corridor will be faster and more frequent by 2030. The EU will have put €165 million into making it happen. On paper, the shared island project is advancing. But the Taoiseach has identified a different problem. Infrastructure without civic engagement is a ladder with rungs missing. You can build the fastest train in the world between Dublin and Belfast. Thinking about the North as part of their political and cultural reality, the train fills up with tourists and business travelers, and the deep work of reconciliation happens at a slower pace than the official calendar suggests. The Shared Home Place program is a response to this. It is a dialogue initiative. It has no budget attached to it that was announced alongside the contract. It is a conversation, which is a start. Conversations are where everything eventually begins. But conversations are also not €698 million contracts. They do not have delivery dates. They cannot be photographed at Grand Central Station. The gap between the map and the territory is this. On the map, the island is increasingly connected. Faster trains, formal councils, joint ministerial visits, EU funding threading through the whole architecture. On the territory, the Taoiseach is standing at a Nobel laureate's podium telling a Belfast audience that the Republic has mentally checked out. Both things are true at the same time. That is the shape of where Ireland is in 2026. Watch the North-South Ministerial Council meeting minutes from Armagh when they are published. Watch whether the Dáil generates any meaningful debate next week about the Taoiseach's Queen's University admission. Watch whether the Shared Home Place programme receives real resources or remains a conversation at the margins of the official agenda. The trains are signed. That chapter is closed. What is not closed is the question the Taoiseach raised himself, whether the island that is building a faster railway is also becoming a more genuinely shared one. The answer to that will not come from a contract. It will come from the people on both sides of the border deciding, again, that it matters.